Can you say what your favorite and least favorite things are about President Trump and President Biden, one at a time? So maybe one thing that you can say super positive about Trump and one thing super negative about Trump.
Okay, so the super positive thing about Trump is that because he has no preconceived views that are establishmentarian, he's sometimes willing to go out of the box and do things that haven't been tried before. And sometimes that works. I mean, the best example being the entire foreign policy establishment telling him that he couldn't get a Middle Eastern deal done unless he centered the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And instead, he just went right around that and ended up cutting a bunch of peace deals in the Middle East or moving the embassy in Jerusalem, right? Sometimes he does stuff and it's really out of the box and it actually works. And that's kind of awesome in politics and neat to see. The downside of Trump is that he has no capacity to use any sort of there's no filter between brain and mouth. Whatever happens in his brain is the thing that comes out of his mouth. I know a lot of people find that charming and wonderful, and from time to, and it is very funny. But I don't think that it is a particularly excellent personal quality in a person who has as much responsibility as President Trump has. I think he says a lot of damaging and bad things on Twitter. I think that he seems consumed in some ways by his own grievances, which is why you've seen him focusing in on election 2020 so much. And I think that is very negative about President Trump. So I'm very grateful to President Trump as a conservative for many of the things that he did. I think that a lot of his personality issues are pretty severe.
What about Joe Biden?
So I think that the thing that I like most about Joe Biden,
Yes.
I will say that Biden, two things. One, Biden seems to be a very good father by all available evidence, right? There are a lot of people who are put out kind of tape of him talking to Hunter and Hunter's having trouble with drugs or whatever. And I keep listening to that tape and thinking, he seems like a really good dad. Like the stuff that he's saying to his son is stuff that, God forbid, if that were happening with my kid, I'd be saying to my kid. Mm-hmm. And so, you can't help but feel for the guy. He's had an incredibly difficult go of it with his first wife and the death of members of his family, and then Bo dying. I mean, like that kind of stuff obviously is deeply sympathetic, and his he seems like a deeply sympathetic father. As far as his politics, he seems like a slap on the back, kind of guy, and I don't mind that. I think that's nice so far as it goes. It's sort of an old school politics where things are done with handshake and personal relationships. The thing that I don't like about him is I think sometimes that's really not genuine. I think that sometimes, I think that's his personal tendency, but I think sometimes he allows the prevailing winds of his party to carry him to incredibly radical places, and then he just doubles down on the radicalism in some pretty disingenuous ways. Mm-hmm. And there I would cite the Independence Day speech or the Independence Hall speech, which I thought was truly one of the worst speeches I've seen a president give.
So you don't think he's trying to be a unifier in general?
Not at all. I mean, that's what he was elected to do. He was elected to do two things: not be alive and be a unifier. Those were the two things. And when I say not be alive, I don't mean like physically dead. This is where the snark comes in. But what I do mean is that he was elected to not be particularly activist. Basically, the mandate was don't be Trump. Be sane. Don't be Trump. Calm everything down. And instead he got in and he's like, what if we spend $7 trillion? What if we pull out of Afghanistan without any sort of plan? What if I start labeling all of my political enemies of the Republic? What if I start bringing Dylan Mulvaney to the White House and talking about how it is a moral sin to prevent the genital mutilation of minors? I mean, like this kind of stuff is very radical stuff. And this is not a president who has pursued a unifying agenda, which is why his approval rating sank from 60% when he entered office to low 40s or high 30s today. Unlike President Trump, who never had a high approval rating, right? Trump came into office and he had like a 45% approval rating. And when he left office, he had about a 43% approval rating. It bounced around between 45 and 37 pretty much his entire presidency. Biden went from being a very popular guy coming in to a very unpopular guy right now. And if you're Joe Biden, you should be looking in the mirror and wondering exactly why.
Do you think that pulling out from Afghanistan could be flipped as a pro for Biden in terms that he actually did it?
I think it's going to be almost impossible. I think the American people are incredibly inconsistent about their own views on foreign policy. In other words, we like to be isolationist until it comes time for us to be defeated and humiliated. When that happens, we tend not to like it very much.